Advice from a Failure by Joe Coder. You do not need to be loved at the cost of yourself. The single relationship that is most essential in life is with yourself. It is rewarding to find someone you like, but essential to like yourself. It is quickening to recognize that somebody is a good and decent human being, but it is indispensable to view your own self in that way. It is a delight to discover people who are worthy of respect, of admiration and love, but it's vital to believe yourself deserving of respect, admiration, and love. For you cannot live in someone else. Of all the people you can ever know in a lifetime, you are the only one you can never lose or leave. To the question of your life, you are the answer. And to the problems of your life, you are the solution. I want to start off with that quote because I felt that it underpinned the theme of what I wanted to talk about today, which is forgiveness and responsibility. And of course, all of this is on the path of healing, right? Of self-reclamation and of standing in one's truth. And those three are all really like interchangeable if you think about it. But maybe to start with forgiveness and what it has meant for me, at least. I've always seen forgiveness as, you're putting something down, right? Forgiveness is a surrender of something. You're giving it away. Something that you once held very close to your heart. And not necessarily close in a dear way, right? But close within resentment, close within grudge, close in rage, whatever that heavy emotion is that kept it caged in your heart. And I never, saw myself as one to be in unforgiveness. And yeah, the people in my life would probably affirm this as well, that like, nah, he doesn't really, he's very chilled, he yeah, you know, doesn't hold things against people. But I realized yesterday that I had had a blind spot over my own unforgiveness my whole life. And I see now why that blindness was there as well, because there was also a protective mechanism to keep that thing in place, to keep that unforgiveness and that protection in place. But what I saw was that, we usually think of unforgiveness as a grudge, right? As something that's quite hot in terms of just its quality. It is something like holding great anger and resentment at something for having hurt you, and you are wishing them like the worst. You wish them all types of damnation, and that's what unforgiveness looks like. But I had missed that unforgiveness can also look like just being hurt, being disappointed, and never trusting that place or person again, sure, but then taking that experience with you wherever you go, and it kind of like you lead with that experience wherever you go, and it colors everything in your life moving forward. And it's just you can also be in unforgiveness with just hurt, and not just with anger. I think also often anger masks the pain underneath. But yeah, it because I am not generally an angry person, and that's its own kind of pathology, and I'm learning to also come into my righteous anger again, as the language is in psychology or spiritual psychology. Yeah, I've never really held on to anger that much, at least consciously. But to pain, I have. To pain, I've really held on. And I never realized that this could be a form of unforgiveness, because the two are doing the same thing, whether you're holding something in pain or just in anger, in that rage, and you like are actively wishing that other person ill. The two are the same in that you've held this event and this person in your heart, and it's kind of like occluding the natural light from shining through you. It's occluding the natural flow of your life. And I wrote somewhere that your heart was never meant to hold prisoners. Your heart is an instrument of love, of light, and we misuse it when we hold like unforgiveness of something or someone. And it's an unnatural use of the heart. And I know it can be triggering to hear this said, because like unforgiveness can also be a very practical and protective, you know, tool, right? When when it just doesn't make sense to forgive someone, when it just isn't safe to forgive and forget, it it doesn't make sense to just let it go, when that very same thing can come back, and or if it's still out there in the world somewhere. Yeah, the unforgiveness just does not seem like a practical thing to do. Oh, sorry, forgiveness does not seem like a practical thing to do. And that was also my position on the unforgiveness I was holding in my heart. Because, you know, chronic hurt becomes chronic pain, becomes chronic grief, becomes chronic unforgiveness, becomes chronic dis-ease. And it just becomes this cycle, where if you're in a relationship or an environment that is hurting you in some way, continuously, that just only gradually leads to your own demise, your own insanity, right? When I say dis-ease, I mean the dis-ease of the physiology, of the other psychology as well, or like the psyche. But a mental illness or chronic illness, or like all these things that can arise from like our bodies just being overwhelmed and burdened with too much pain, right? Pain that has no place to release, has no place to reconcile. And yeah, it doesn't make sense to forgive in that sense, because like unforgiveness is the thing that is almost like a program in your mind, like, okay, that's not safe, and like in order to remember that, I'm gonna install this program that kind of directs me away from this thing, right? Directs my whole energy away from this thing, and that's gonna keep me safe. So that was a practicality of not forgiving in situations that um, I could not escape, you know, for whatever reason. Right. And to talk about a bit about that pain as well, that for me, it actually manifested within the psyche and in the physiology. Within the psyche, it was for many years I had depression, and I had, had and still do have to a degree anxiety, right? And all of kind of like that whole configuration was also coming from this like somatic pain. And for the longest time, I would have just described it as pain within my solar plexus, so like right above your stomach and below your heart, kind of like where your rib cage, um, you know, parts. But so there, I'd always feel like a turning or a tensing or a pulsing, and it was just very uncomfortable. And it's essentially it's very strange to describe, but this pain body is not something that is necessarily physical and tangible. Like if I were to be, for whatever reason, cut into half, they will not find anything there, right? It's more like a conglomeration of energy, right? Like this energy is just like coagulated, and it's uncomfortable there, it's stuck there. And yeah, that was, I guess, the most visible part of my pain body. But then recently, I've been realizing that no, this pain body actually emanates, it goes all the way up to my heart, and the pain in my heart is a lot more subtle, but it's a lot more, I think, a lot more devastating is the only word that can come up. But just to briefly describe it, it is this um, this very low, this very kind of cold and quiet energy, and it's almost blue, right? This dark blue, and it's colored in grief, right? And in kind of like this withdrawal. And so it also expresses a lot as, like physiologically, it can express like a lot as a numbness of sorts, right, or an emptiness. Even though I'm realizing that in itself is an experience of its own. It's an object of its own, right? The emptiness is also an object, or it's also like it also carries meaning. It's also a happening, you know. And yeah, I've also been reading a lot of Michael Singer lately. I've been reading his book, The Untethered Soul, and how he talks about, you know, like I was saying earlier, the heart being um, a portal of like light and love, as woo as that sounds. I think ultimately when you really connect to your heart and you breathe from there, and um, and you lead from there, it really, you can feel a luminance or like a radiance, emanating from there. And I've always seen my heart as the source of my like my inspiration and my vitality. It's when my heart has been the heaviest that I've been the gloomiest, and things have just been the most hopeless. So the heart really colors the whole experience of life, based on how heavy or how light it is at any given moment. I think of a quote somewhere that says, that angels can fly because they can take themselves lightly. That you need a light heart in order to float, in order to ascend. You know, and that is true for everyday life as well. in order to thrive, in order to just um, be in joy and in peace, you need a light heart. And that's why, for me, forgiveness has increasingly just been presented by my spirit and by my higher self as not really a negotiable. Even if, even as I want to hold on, to that remembering of like what happened and never to go there and never to do that again and never to, all that stuff. Never, never, never. All the reasons not to. Um, Even though I want to hold on to that to protect myself, because I think I'm protecting myself, I was actually giving too much power away to that event, and it was like sabotaging the, like sabotaging the freedom I was actually trying to get in my life, the emotional, the spiritual, and the like freedom within life. And okay, doesn't pause. Because my heart was heavy. Because my heart was heavy. Right. And if I wanted to heal in the way that I was, praying and really dreaming to heal, then this had to be the way through, the forgiveness. And it wasn't going to always be rational within my mind, within the ego that wants to hold on and protect and preserve. It wasn't going to be an appealing solution or like an appealing um, choice to make. And ultimately, that's what it is it's just a choice. And yesterday I really battled with this when I kind of had the realization that giving giving power away to the past is giving your responsibility away for yourself to the past. You're letting the past kind of like define you or your story, and that's not. You can, but all the while, in the past and even in the present, there was always something there that has remained undeniable and has remained, alive, whether we like it or not. And that is the truth of who you are, you know. And whatever event occurred back then or whatever's happening now, the truth of you is still alive and well. Okay, maybe not, maybe not well per se, but like it's within there, right? Um, and it's your responsibility and no one else's to bring that truth into reality, right? But when we continue to give reasons as to why this truth cannot exist within the present, within reality, why it can't be expressed, and the reasons are all based in the past, you're giving the past that power, and that responsibility over yourself. And each thing you claim to really want for yourself, for your health, for your relationship, for your whatever career, it all really comes down to stepping into yourself and standing with yourself in integrity and finding that harmony and alignment and peace. And I believe, and I'm coming to see more and more how that's all synonymous with that's all synonymous with holding that truth and owning that truth, and no longer relegating responsibility for that truth to something that happened, an opinion that was made, um, a betrayal that was made upon that truth, however, so many years ago. And it's like, it doesn't matter what happened then, the truth is and has always been here and within, you know. Your spirit, your soul has never really wavered or left, even beneath all of the veils and even beneath all of the clutter and the shame and the layers and layers and layers of the hiding. It's always been there and it cannot be denied. And the only way forward really is to take responsibility for that, and that's a big responsibility, right? Because it means suddenly you can't blame anymore. You can't rest on the blame anymore. You can't rest on the victimhood anymore. You actually need to pick yourself up and just keep walking, you know. And that takes courage, and it takes energy. It takes energy and it takes resilience. And I realized as well that I had kind of like an imposter syndrome, or maybe a sense of incompetence when it came to this. Some degree, not completely, but somewhere at the back of my mind, I was procrastinating a little bit, taking the responsibility upon my own truth and upon my own life, and still resting on the victimhood and the blame in the form of that unforgiveness. Still resting on that because it offered a sort of comfort of like, okay, I don't really have to go toward that opportunity or start that conversation or do that thing that I've been wanting to do, because I mean, look at me, like, look what happened. It was that kind of thing. It offered a rationalization for inaction. It offered a rationalization for inaction. And I had to now step forward. And that was like, the part of me that was so comfortable was like a bit uneasy with it, because I was like, shit, like, do I really have what it takes to actually go start the conversation, to walk toward that opportunity, to do something, to make the life that I actually want for myself, you know. And I also just had to, process through that sense of incompetence and realize that it in itself was a kind of just a defense mechanism, to say, just to kind of convince it was my ego's little defense mechanism to try and convince me not to go toward that thing, because the mind is sneaky in that way, right? It tells you stories, and if you don't have that distance between the mind and who you truly are, right, the soul, and your true being, if you take your mind stories to be yours and to be the reality, then it's just gonna fabricate all types of things to protect you and to cushion you, and you'll never really know the difference. You'll never really know that it's just like, you'll never see the strategy, I guess, what it is, But with the benefit of that distance of watching the thoughts, you can actually see, what it's trying to do, And so I was able to see that it was actually just still trying to protect me from moving toward that pain, taking responsibility and forgiving, And then I was like, okay, let me just make the decision right now. Like, why can't I just decide to forgive all of it, And then, of course, all the reasons want to come up. And here's something I also want to mention is, Forgiveness is sometimes it is the result, it is a product of a process we have been on. It is the natural result of a process of healing. It is a natural result of your healing. And it's not always easy to just do it on command like that when all of you is still contracted and clenched against that pain, right? But when you've had time to sit down and sift through those layers of grief and pain and the stories and the events, and to just grieve, and to and to rage, and to write it out, and to sing it out, whatever, right? then then it's like you've created a certain kind of like channel through which, or an opening through which that pain can now just flow and be released, and it's now possible that that can even take place, right? And it's not always possible when you haven't had the time and the place to process that. So I don't want to make too light the too light of this business of forgiveness, because it is a difficult thing to do. But I realize that I've come to a point where I've been doing shadow work now for 3-4 years, maybe 3 years intently, and really processing through things and really grieving. And all of these reasons that are coming up in my mind why I can't forgive are like, they're kind of obsolete. Like I've worked through those things, and so it was like, okay, why can't I still do it? And I was like, I don't know if I have the will, like, do I have to, like, I didn't feel like I was like, I had the power to do it all of a sudden, and that was another trick of the mind. And I was like, no, but I have to now kind of summon my will, and as much as the unforgiveness was a choice, the forgiveness itself is also a choice that can be made just as well, and really and truly, you have the last say on kind of like what happens within you. You are the director, of your being, and your beliefs, and what you hold within you. And I was like, as much as I can make a decision to get up and to make myself some coffee, or to go for a walk, or to go to the shop, or to go to work, I can direct my will in those ways. And those are far more almost like exerting kind of like, things, right? Like they exert a lot more energy and will. But all it was just a resistance masked in that difficulty of like, ooh, what if I can't do it? What if it's a big decision? Like, what do I have to do? And I was like, dude, just make the decision, and just keep making the decision. And that's really all there is to it. And so that's what I did. And so that's what I did. And even as I say it, there's a part of my mind, my ego, that wants to be like, but are you sure it's done? Like, it can't be that easy, right? And you know what? Perhaps things will still come up, and things have continued to come up ever since I said that, ever since I made that conscious, you know, will aligned kind of choice. Things still have come up that have triggered dialogues, and feelings that were in unforgiveness, and that's also okay, right? Because I'm realizing that it's also a series of choices where once I would have gone and followed those things down a long road, and arguing with them, and contesting with them, and agreeing, and it's a whole fight, and things are getting riled up, and I'm getting all types of triggered. In that moment when those things came up, I could just forgive them and breathe out and release, and literally just feel it like, pass. And it can, and that is appearing to be what the process is gonna look like, but it really isn't a process per se in terms of like, continuous kind of like work and labor. No, it's just a choice. It's a choice. You're making the same choice over and over and over, in the same way that that unforgiveness was a choice you're making over and over and over. It's not just a choice you left, running on autopilot for the past 10 years. Like, it is a choice you've been making each time you've been confronted with a similar kind of triggering situation, right? And so to make another choice, you know, and I'm trying to think if there's something else I wanted to mention before I close, but yeah, the fact that responsibility is so tied to, or like forgiveness is so tied to taking responsibility for one's life. And, it's neither here nor there or right or wrong if one is not ready to forgive. Like, there is no wrong way to do this journey thing. But yeah, for me, I just realized that within the particular, like within the phase or the chapter that I was in, trying to really overcome and trying to expand, into new things, and trying to step into a life of just of health and ease and thriving. Unforgiveness was just one thing I could not continue to hold on to because it was weighing me down. It was weighing me down and it was closing me up, and it was also restricting. It was restricting the types of things that can come through to me. So so for me, that was just something that came through as like an imperative, or like a step in taking responsibility in a deeper aspect, within my own journey. And it's not easy, right? It's not easy because it really means dropping the story. It really means dropping the victimhood and dropping the wounds, that in many ways I've also built a whole persona around. Michael Singer in that book talks about how we have these thorns, on our sides, or like on our hearts, right? And these are the pains we have in life, and each time that thorn gets disturbed, that something on the outside touches it, we get disturbed, and we don't want that to happen. So we can build a whole life of like trying to make space for that thorn so that nothing touches it, and it can look like success for a long time, and it can look like you've overcome the thing for the longest time, but in reality you've simply built your whole life around that thorn, right? And so I'm also starting to humbly see all the ways that my life thus far and my ego identity have been in service to protecting and cushioning and avoiding this pain, right? And now just moving toward it in forgiveness and acceptance, and a readiness to just take responsibility, for all that is me. So I think that's where I'm going to leave it today. But yeah, thanks for watching and see you in the next one.